Hello, everyone. This is our third chapter and our third presentation over the harms and lack of capabilities in South American countries. In our last presentation, we'll finally be providing one of the solutions we have developed throughout the whole semester. And we're calling this presentation The Ethics of Providing Foreign Aid. In this presentation, Devin and I, Emerson Cardoza, will go in depth of a proposed solution and how they will combat the harms that are faced by the average citizen in South America, most notably in El Salvador. Furthermore, after we explain our solution, we'll talk about some drawbacks and some potential pushback some people may have in accordance to our solution. And then we'll, on top of that, after all that, explain why our solution is the best. Sit back, hold tight, and I hope you all enjoy our presentation. So, before we dive in too deep into the impacts of gang violence, especially in El Salvadorian citizens, I want to acknowledge our main contributor to our understanding of how how the gangs influence not only the youth, but women and children, and the male perspective. We're going to give our thanks to Dr. Sonia Wolf, who is a political science and research professor in Mexico, whose focus is on security policies, gang dynamics, and violence in Central America. We will specifically talk about her article called Mano Dura, The Politics of Gang Control in El Salvador, where she doesn't present her own ideas. She critically compares different ideas across different authors and compiles them collectively into one presentation. This gives us such a unique perspective in which she can bring all these compelling narratives, all from different first sources to analysis of government, to analysis, to ethical analysis, to psychology, giving us a fuller understanding of what actually happens within the youth. For example, she engages that now Devin and I have proposed a new solution to our problem, especially in South America and El Salvador. We have decided that the United States should focus all of its aid directly into the educational system. As a result, students will be incentivized to actually complete school and will be less incentivized to join these gangs. On top of that, the United States should also focus heavily on rewarding these students for completing their high school degrees and even pursuing higher education, even if that means leaving the country. This will not only decrease the amount of harm students face, but it will also create a new image for the new generations to come to see that they too have a life outside the violence they live in. For the actual gang members already there, who have taken control and oftentimes centralized around their home country. We, in the long run, in the short run, cannot do much about that. But in the long run, we can change the perspectives of this youth, and that is way more beneficiary than just putting an iron fist on these people and swaying the public view that way. Devin and I, and with the discernment of Chris in our class, have thought the best way to mitigate long-termly these gangs and their affiliation is to cut them right at the source. And the source is the youth. If we can sway the youth, we can sway them away from the everlasting harms gangs have on the youth. And on top of that, by reallocating the aid from the United States directly to a foundation of the country that would promote bettering and promote a better society. That way, the gangs cannot use the money to keep their business sustainable, and rather the US dollar would be used to actually aid people, while at the same time break down the crystallized structures these gangs have built.
While we think our recommendation is very good, we also understand that there will be objections that come with it. So, we've decided to compile some of the objections we think will be the most used by those that disagree with us, and we will later get into how we think that our solution or recommendation kind of surpasses what these objections are saying. The first would be a political concern involving providing foreign aid to El Salvador or other South American countries. And some may argue that it is an interference of their sovereignty and it creates a dependence on the United States for aid, which is an objection that makes a lot of sense and is worth considering, but we think that there are ways to bypass this that we will discuss a little bit further. The second is a concern in how we are prioritizing where aid's going. And so a lot of people could make the objection that if we are going to provide aid to El Salvador or other South American countries, we need to be focusing on more immediate concerns such as food or the healthcare and well-being of the people in the country. And once again, this is something that is extremely important, but we think the nature of our recommendation will overall have a greater benefit than the short-term benefits that would be prioritizing on food and other similar healthcare concerns. And the third main concern we considered was people saying that it's not fair to provide aid to El Salvador or South American countries when there are people within the United States that would need the aid and welfare benefits just as much. And once again, another solid objection to our recommendation. And this is something worth considering, but while we should focus on our country as well, that doesn't mean we should completely disconcern ourselves with that of other problems that are taking place in foreign countries, and we think that's something that's still worth considering. So we will get into further ways that we can combat these objections, or not combat them, but understand them and move on in a way that benefits everyone. When facing such strong and reasonable objections, it's important that we consider them charitably and critically. When assessing our recommendation, we think we are in a position to still go on with our recommendation based on the fact that the objections either bring up a negligence that we surpass in the near future given what we're planning, or we don't think that the objections themselves are necessarily in line with our recommendation, and they're instead a way of trying to prevent any aid to El Salvador as a whole. Now, considering the political objection that I provided earlier with the idea that we will create a dependency of El Salvador on the United States, we don't think that's necessarily clear, and part of that is through our understanding of Nussbaum's capabilities approach, and we think in giving educational freedom to El Salvadorians, it will provide them with their own agency to try to make change in their own society and provide better future for themselves and expand their freedoms as a person. And in doing so, this won't be necessarily creating an independence, but it'll create a deep independence of the individual to improve their situation. And the moral objection that I provided in terms of whether or not we should provide aid in the form of food or healthcare, we think the difference here is that while this is an immediate form of aid, and it does help with the harms that are being provided to these individuals, we also think that it's a form of aid that will actually form more of a dependency because we aren't attacking the problem at the root issue like we need to be. We think by providing educational aid, we will give people long-term success by providing them with, once again, the freedoms to create more security for their families, and education that can lead to them having better opportunities, and in turn improve their health and the health of the future generations to come. And then we also discussed how there's a fairness problem with whether or not we should focus on the needs of El Salvadorians when there are people in the United States or other countries in South America that are also facing situations similar and a lack of capabilities. Personally, we think that the structural disadvantages that are faced by El Salvadorians are still something that shouldn't go overlooked. And while there are problems in other countries and the United States itself, we don't think that aid should be diminished due to our idea of how El Salvador should be treated, because we think everyone who has their capabilities minimized should have the ability to create some form of freedom for themselves. So instead of saying that we should take the aid from El Salvador and put it elsewhere, we think that people should be willing to make the change in their lives to aid others who are less fortunate. And for the argument of people saying that there's an immigration issue in the United States, we think this will overall decrease that, because by providing a scenario where someone is more willing to live in the country that they were born in and they have opportunities there, they will be less likely to go to another country to try to receive those same basic capabilities. So overall, we think that this recommendation will have a positive impact on El Salvador as a country, as well as for those who are worried about immigration, the immigration that El Salvadorians are having coming to the United States.
This is our works cited, and I hope you have enjoyed our presentation and our little mini series on YouTube. Thank you so much for taking the time and listening to our presentation. Have a wonderful day.